about cravings. If you are a perimenopausal woman, yeah, your hands would have been like mine were in the cookie jar and going, why am I doing this? I know it's not good for me. So we're going to do some digging into the root causes, and we're going to be talking about why an all or nothing approach to managing weight isn't the way to go if we want to have a healthy weight and maintain that. Welcome to the Thriving Through Menopause podcast with me, Clarissa Kristjansson. I am passionate that taking a holistic approach to perimenopause and menopause can help us to thrive, not just survive. I sit down with world-class experts to talk about the latest understanding around menopause and to provide you with practical tips that you can action in your life. Episodes drop every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share this podcast with another woman who might be able to use this information to navigate their menopause journey. And I'm super delighted to be joined by Dr. Jessie Hehmeyer, and she is a physician, founder of Well Empowered, where she practices data-driven, outcome-orientated functional medicine. I love that. Welcome, Jessie.
Thank you so much, Clarissa. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and your community.
It's so great to have someone who's really focused on root cause natural medicine, but the fact that data matters in this too.
Absolutely. It really does.
Yeah, it really does. Yes, it does. Because we're just chucking supplements and ideas around, but we need to go to some real data that helps people feel way better. Let's begin with cravings, because they are very common for my listeners. There are probably lots of my listeners out there, aren't you, going, I've got real cravings, particularly for sugar.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Well, in my experience, Clarissa, there are 5 common causes of cravings. And for most people, the source of their cravings does not just fall in one category. So, for you listeners, as you listen, you want to listen for what do I believe is true or what might be true for me, right? And, to go through the lineup of the 5 most common causes of cravings, the first cause is being on what I like to call the blood sugar roller coaster, right? And this is kind of like the vicious circle of cravings. And to say a little bit about this, it's a physiological response. And, what happens is when we eat high sugar foods, these could be foods that are obviously sweet, things like cookies or candies or cake or ice cream, things like that. Or they could also be things that are low in fiber, but high in starchy carbs, right? So things like white rice or pasta. These are just things that, fundamentally speaking, the impact on our blood sugar is the same whether we taste the sweetness or not. So what happens is our blood sugar goes up really high. Our body doesn't like that. Our body doesn't like it when our blood sugar is really high. It's, blood sugar is a bit like a Goldilocks sort of number, right? We want it not too high and not too low. So when our blood sugar goes up really high, our body comes to the scene and produces insulin to bring down our blood sugar into a range that is safe and healthy for our body. So our blood sugar goes up high, we produce a lot of insulin, and then our blood sugar goes down in the ditch. And when our blood sugar is down in the ditch, that's when we're most likely to experience cravings, right? Because we're looking for a way to bring our blood sugar back up. And we're going to crave foods that will do that quickly, which simply put is more sugar, more simple carbs, right? So whether you're someone who tends to reach for, pretzels, the simple carbs but not sweet, or something sweet, though that's the function it serves. So the nice thing about that is when we can see the physiological source of it, it makes it a lot less personal, right? Because for a lot of us, when we experience cravings, we have the sense of, oh, bad me, I'm a failure, what's wrong, this kind of moral conversation that really is just not useful and just not true, right? There's actually a physiological source to what's going on. So, that's number one. And then if we go down the lineup, the next one is insufficient sleep, which is kind of funny when we think about the symptoms people experience around menopause, right? Perimenopausal sleep disturbances, hot flashes, stuff like that. It's like, geez, this is a double whammy, right?
Yep.
So when we're not sleeping well, we're not sleeping long enough, or the quality of our sleep is not great, we will naturally crave more food. And the reason for that, and crave more simple carbs, the reason for that is it's a bit of a confusion in our brain. Our brain perceives I need more energy as I need some sugar, right? I need some sugar, or rather than I need more energy, I need more sleep. So it's a confusion of sorts by the brain. And then also when that sleep is not as great, not enough, or not as super high quality, it's going to impact our ability to keep our blood sugar levels stable. It impacts our hormones and how they work. So we have another physiological happening going on. So oftentimes, for people who are dealing with sleep disturbances and dealing with cravings, a great way to start to make a shift in the severity or frequency of the cravings is to see how we can support your sleep better, right? See if we can, we have many different tools to alleviate hot flashes naturally. We have many different tools to improve sleep quality naturally. So starting to pull on those is going to have some spiral of benefits.
Yeah. And of course, if we have poor sleep, we don't have the same appetite regulation, do we?
Yes, absolutely, Clarissa, you've got it. We do not have the same appetite regulation if we're not sleeping well. So I like to think about sleep as our body's superpower. It's just, over the years, as I've started to learn more, research more about physiological sleep benefits, it amazes me. And it also it makes me look back at my younger years and, go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that, less sleep for so long. Right?
Sleep is super, super important. And as you said, a lot of women have very poor sleep for a variety of reasons at this time. Some of it's hot flashes, but also very low levels of progesterone and therefore low levels of GABA in the body. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there we are, not very helpful at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so then, the third common cause of cravings is insufficient nutrients, right? And nutrients, that's a big term. What kind of nutrients do I mean? Well, it could be magnesium, it could be omega-3 fatty acids, maybe it's vitamin D that's playing a role. Zinc, right? These are different nutrients play a role in how we stabilize our blood sugar, in our hormones, our production, and our receptors, our neurotransmitters. So there are a variety of different nutrients that could be impacting our cravings, simply put. So those are knowable. We can do lab tests to understand if this is at play for someone. And, as I mentioned, it's very common that it's not just one of those 5 common areas of sources of cravings, but it's usually a combination. Number 4 is, emotions. And this might be true. This is true for anyone of any age, right? People often look to food for a source of comfort, for a source of nurturing. And it's not wrong or bad. It's just sometimes it's not a match for our intended health experience, our intended health outcomes. And so again, pulling out that, sense of shame that many people experience around cravings and the sense of, kind of being out of control can create a little space for compassion and beginning to work with the emotions in a way that's productive, right? We were talking before we hopped on about the wonders of meditation, right? Learning how to be there for yourself in the moment of upset, whatever the term is you give to that upset, sadness, loneliness, frustration, whatever's there.
Yeah.
And that is there are many different ways to support yourself and to start to begin to come up with new ways to self-nurture and to self-soothe
Yes.
in a way that is a match for your intended health and your intended experience of yourself.
Exactly. And of course, as women in perimenopause and menopause, we have less estrogen. So we are producing less serotonin, which is one of our soothing hormones. It makes us feel good. So maybe we look more to external sources, Jessie, for this sense of comfort because the body isn't quite giving that at the same rate as it did earlier.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's very well said. Mm-hmm. And then, the fifth one is source of cravings is our environment. Does our environment pull for making choices nutritionally that are really supporting our blood sugar, that are really supporting our intention? And, a very simple example of that is if you walk into your kitchen and look at your countertop, what do you see? Do you see avocados or an apple or nuts? Or do you see brownies, right? What we see in our environment really does shift our in the moment experience and can trigger cravings or trigger actions that really end up making us feel very proud of ourselves.
Yeah. And I think also we have grocery environments that are not very conducive to us keeping those cravings under control. I once heard, and I love your comment on this, Liz, that you shouldn't go shopping on an empty stomach.
Yes, absolutely. Not unless you have this area of your life mastered, right? Don't go shopping on an empty stomach, right? And it is so true, Clarissa. So my husband and I, we currently work remotely. I call it working remotely in Switzerland, and our family and friends are all back in the States. So we come and see them, and we're actually we're in the States right now. And for the first time here, I walked into a grocery store. And I noticed how they actually put the produce in the most inconvenient place. And it made me want to cry. It made me so sad that what people do when they walk into that store is they see the sodas, they see the chips, they see the sugary things that are triggering their brain. Go, 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 right? And then if they make a left turn and go, walk another couple of steps and weave through a few more aisles, they would find the produce. It just made me really sad to see that.
Yeah, and that of course, then the first things you're thinking is, oh yeah, and you load it in because it's automatic, isn't it? And you load all that, well, crap, basically.
Right, perfect term. Let's just call it what it is.
Let's go. It is crap. It's not food. Into your trolley.
Yeah.
And we can't help that. And it's the same as having all these confectionery at the checkout because we're standing there, we're bored. We buy it, and we probably often eat it in the checkout too.
Right, absolutely. And to your point, there's like this micro environment. We talked about your kitchen, right? That's pretty obvious. But I know for myself, when I took on, this was over 20 years ago now, that I really drew a line in the sand for myself and made a decision that I would master this area of my life and not be owned by food. For me, it was really about freedom. And one of the practices I started taking on was when I was in line, when I was at a checkout, and just like you were saying, they have all the sugar right there in front of me, I would intentionally not look there, right? It was like I made a choice in those moments to not look there. So maybe I'd look at the magazine or, the lip balm or whatever, but I wouldn't look there. And, it's funny. It's now I don't need that from a resistance standpoint, but it's still a habit because I'm like, why would I look there? I'm a no to those things. No.
Yeah, me too. And they're exactly in my checkout as I come out there. They're the very last thing in the checkout place before I go to the checkout. And they're all sort of here, and I just go, no, and just navigate as much as possible. Sometimes I go just one for the week,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm that strict, and then there's no more.
Yeah.
But we have these 5 causes of obviously our blood sugar, insufficient sleep, insufficient nutrients, emotions, and obviously we talk about environment. But in each of those areas, what, Jessie, can consumers or listeners start to do to change that? What can women be doing to change these cravings?
Yeah. So to start with, that physiological blood sugar phenomenon, I think about low-hanging fruit with spiral up benefits, meaning, okay, what is one shift someone could make that would meaningfully impact a lot of different things, right? And so for me in that area, we could talk about a lot of different things, but the one thing I'd invite people to begin practicing, and it really is a practice, right? Just like you learn to ride your bike. I don't know anyone who didn't fall when they were learning to ride their bike. So you want to bring that kind of beginner's mindset and, compassion and kind of like expectancy, like, I'm going to learn, I'm going to fall off my bike and I'm going to get back on it, kind of an attitude. And eventually I'll just be riding my bike, right? But the thing that I would have people begin to practice is the first meal of the day, making sure that is protein, fat-centric with quality carbohydrates. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, a protein, fat-centric with quality carbohydrates would mean that you have roughly 20 grams of protein. Maybe it's 16, maybe it's a little more, but just kind of ballparking in that range. In the way of fats, we're looking for fats that are enhancing our hormonal function. These are things, if we want to use a technical term, are poly and monounsaturated fats. But to give you examples, we're talking about things like nuts and nut butters and seed butters and things like avocado and guacamole and olive oil. You kind of choose your chia seeds, your flax seeds, which offer a lot of different things as it pertains to our hormonal health also. So you can choose within that category, but making sure there are sufficient fats present because they really promote satiety. That protein's going to help stabilize our blood sugar. That fat's going to promote the sense of, ooh, I feel like I've actually eaten something, like pull the lever of our satiety hormonal response. And then in the way of quality carbohydrates, what I'm thinking about is, okay, are they giving me vitamins and minerals? Are they giving me some fiber? If probably a little bit of both, right? So things like our berries, things like a high fiber grain of sorts, whether that's in the oatmeal world or in the high fiber bread world. Those are the things that I start to think about.
Yeah, so a good breakfast might be something like a couple of boiled eggs, some avocado, and a whole grain toast.
Beautiful example, Clarissa. Beautiful. Exactly. And the cool thing about that is, listeners, if this is new to you, my encouragement is to try it and notice. One of the things that I hear from the people who I work with is like, oh my goodness, the same amount of calories lasts me so many more hours. Like I'm not hungry before lunch. At lunch, I'm ready to eat, but I'm not searching for more food at 10 o'clock, when I've had a breakfast that is keeping my blood sugar levels stable.
Exactly. And that is really a move away from these sugary cereals.
Yes.
And maybe a little bit back with better fats than where we were. I mean, I wouldn't encourage the eating of an English breakfast like my dad did, but there were elements of that that were quite good because he would have mushrooms and tomatoes and whole grain toast and eggs. We can debate the bacon back and forth, but But, or he'd have like a kipper, you know what that is, like a
Oh, yeah.
smoked haddock,
Yes.
a smoked fish.
Yes.
He would
Great.
have that for breakfast
Lovely. So
with toast
lovely.
or something like that,
Yeah.
and so we are moving back in a modern way to some of that with some better things, shouldn't we be
Yes,
doing that?
absolutely. Absolutely. So, instead of being overwhelmed by all the things you could do, that would be a really powerful place to start. Just begin practicing that breakfast habit. And
Yeah, and of course a lot of people aren't doing breakfast, so that's part of the issue too.
absolutely, I am so with you, Clarissa. Um, Speaking of, the cadence of when we eat, right? I know there are some people who are very devoted to intermittent fasting, and, that's a whole other conversation. But especially for women who are going through menopause, I typically find that increases the stress load on their body in a way that's just not useful.
Absolutely. It's just too long periods without sufficient nutrients,
Yeah.
and then everything's sort of crammed in,
Yes.
and then again, and I think that it makes us feel tired. We're tired already. Yeah.
Absolutely. I also, a couple of years ago, when this first kind of, hit the mainstream as the new kid on the block and in diets, so to speak, right? I wrote a blog called "Is Intermittent Fasting an Eating Disorder Rebranded?" And or actually, I said disordered eating rebranded, right? But I would say. For some people, the answer is yes. And again, we don't need to go down that rabbit hole any further, but just to validate, like, okay, one of the ways you can support your hormones is by not intermittent fasting and by having a breakfast that really is going to support your stress response, your satiety levels, your blood sugar.
Yeah. And obviously get enough protein in, because we're quite short on protein at times.
Yes.
So we talk about insufficient sleep, and you mentioned some things there too. So
yeah, well, and we talked about, you mentioned so wonderfully, okay, low progesterone, right? There are certainly many women who a little bit of progesterone solves so many different problems, right? So that might be the resource, something to look into in the way of supporting sleep. It also might be doing a little bit of progesterone and a little bit of GABA supplementation. It might be, there are many different ways to skin the cat, but, you could even start by, if you looking at your sleep hygiene, a place to look might be, okay, am I engaging with my electronics, within an hour of bedtime? That definitely is going to more naturally interfere with our sleep quality. So beginning to, if that's a point of opportunity, a point of leverage for you, beginning to move that back, beginning to shift, your electronic curfew, so to speak. So a lot of different points of leverage there, and many different great supplements that we can use to support sleep quality.
Absolutely. Are there any you particularly recommend?
Yeah, you know what? I love, there's one by Pure Encapsulations, and I don't have an affiliation with them or anything like that. It's called Best Rest. And why I love it is it has just a little bit of melatonin. It's not a lot, but a little bit. And what else it has in it? Really, it has some lemon balm and some hops, and it has a little bit of GABA in it. And so collectively, a little bit of glycine. It allows for high quality sustained sleep that doesn't create that drowsy, drugged feeling in the morning, which I don't know about you, Clarissa, but I've taken a few supplements that left me there, and it's like, I'm a pretty darn good sleeper, so it's rare that I need to take something, but I'd rather not sleep than wake up feeling drugged personally. So I'm very sensitive to that. So this Best Rest is really, for a lot of people, does the job. Typical dose is 2 capsules before bed, but for people who know they're a little more sensitive, I'll have them take one capsule and pull it apart and just start with like a little dab, if you're that sensitive. If you're someone who, you could take a boatload and be unaffected, then great. Start with the full dose. No problem.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And I mean, ashwagandha I found personally is really helpful for me. If
Yeah.
I've got a lot on
Mm-hmm.
and my mind's a little over busy, then I find an adaptogen like ashwagandha really helps. And of course,
Yeah.
as we said, when we get good sleep, it flows through to our appetite regulation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in the
So,
way of nutrients,
yeah.
that's so individual, right? It's like, okay,
Yes.
what are the labs telling us? And we want to support the body
Mm,
based on that, right? I'm a
yeah.
big proponent of, getting the numbers, testing, not
Mm,
guessing, that kind of
yeah.
approach when it comes to the
Yeah.
nutrients.
Yeah. Because people get a lot of sort of, I think, generalized like take magnesium
Right.
or take this, that, and the other. But we may be getting sufficient magnesium if our diet is quite high in certain dark leafy vegetables and the
Yeah,
like. And it
absolutely.
might be zinc or something else we're
Yes.
low on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, on the emotional front, we talked a little bit about some of the solutions. One of the interesting things is oftentimes our nutrient deficiencies or insufficiencies can be affecting our production of neurotransmitters, not to mention, the natural hormonal shifts that are happening that are showing up in our neurotransmitters as well.
Yeah.
But making sure you're looking at the pace of your life as a whole and kind of evaluating, is this pace working for me, right? Is my sense of upset or frustration or overwhelm, is there something about how many straws are on the camel's back, right? And while this might be an uncomfortable inquiry, what might I be a no to that would
Mm-hmm.
simply put reduce how often I feel overwhelmed,
Yeah.
right?
Because it's natural when we are overwhelmed. Obviously, our cortisol levels are high, aren't they, Jessie? And then our blood sugar does a little
Mm-hmm.
roller coaster because everything is diverted to keeping that system on alert.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And so just like we were saying, how interconnected everything is, as you begin to practice keeping your blood sugar levels stable, with that, for example, with that breakfast, over time, that will show up as benefits with emotions as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, everything is deeply interconnected. So I love this conversation that here we're seeing, lower your cholesterol, improve your sleep, regulate your blood sugar. So we're this really holistic human.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we talked quite a bit about environment there.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so great. I mean, some really clear, a lot of those are physiological in nature, a lot of these cravings, and then some are emotional, environmental, but we can certainly do things about it, can't we?
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. So we're going to have a little conversation here too about weight, because weight and menopause. We know that one. Listeners, you know that one too, eh? But I mean, you're very much about um, that the all or nothing approach is often at the source of some of our weight struggles. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah. So the all or nothing approach is what I call the inherited approach or inherited paradigm to our weight, to nutrition, to how we're caring for our body as a whole. And this all or nothing approach is expressed as deprivation or overindulgence, right? That is the expression of an all or nothing approach. And fundamentally, deprivation or overindulgence, this all or nothing approach, is born of self aggression. And in my experience, self aggression is not a good match for my intended experience or my intended health outcomes, right? So it's not like it produces objective outcomes and I just feel crummy. It's like I feel crummy and I don't produce the outcomes. It's like nobody wins, you know?
No.
So, you know, when I work with people, it is really a journey of dropping this inherited approach and the scripts that go with it. You know, there are many different scripts we could talk about, right? The bad me, the shame script we talked about a little bit earlier. And also just really that belief that either I'm doing something like an autoimmune paleo Whole30 diet, or I'm eating an entire pizza and drinking a bottle of wine. Like those are the two options, really, right? But it would seem so, right? It really does.
Yeah.
It does. In the experience, it really does feel like those are the options. So I get it. And, you know, this is why the diet industry is so big, because they have, quote unquote, the answer. And the answer is living in this all or nothing paradigm. So, it really is a journey to author what I like to call your middle ground. So authoring and mastering over time what it is to live your middle ground. And your middle ground is that sweet spot bend, that sweet spot sway, right? Clarissa, earlier you said, once in a while I'll grab one of those lovely things at the checkout and I'll have one in a week and I'll be on my merry way. Beautiful example of a middle ground, right? And so finding that place for yourself of what is not too tight and what is not too loose. And it also moves me in a way from self-love towards my intended health outcomes. So it's a complete shift in how we're relating to ourselves and our body and how we're fueling ourselves and in the journey itself, right? Because as we said, when you're looking to master anything, you are going to have moments of failure. I know that stinks. Yeah. Nobody likes it, but it's just true. Tell me anything you've mastered that at some point you haven't failed along the way, right? Think of a tennis player, Serena Williams. You think she's won every match? Absolutely not, right? Yeah. She got so good because she learned from her errors. And so too can we.
I really love that. And I think it fits very much with the way I teach in the mindfulness space too, that we're not looking to never meditate or meditate for half an hour. There's a middle ground. There's a middle ground with our exercise, that we don't want to do nothing, but we don't want to go to the hard edge. And we're finding that we're moving in this all the time, in this middle ground. Maybe some days a walk is it.
Yes.
Some days I need to lie down and rest, and that's okay too, listeners. I'm telling you, that is okay. And then other days, it's like, well, I can get out and I can lift some weights and or go for a run, because that energy is there. Mm-hmm. So that, it applies to our life, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I love the examples you just gave. It really illustrates so beautifully is, moving from self-love, we start to cultivate trust with ourselves and trust in our own wisdom, right? Yeah. One day it's a nap because that's what our body needs. Another day it's a walk because that's what our body needs. Another day it's lifting weights because that's what our body needs. And it's figuring all of that out and finding your way to craft a journey that really does honor the essentials of caring for our body. Because to me, there is no more powerful expression of love of self, love of the divine, whatever you want to call that, magical thing that has us be here.
Yes.
It is really, how do I care for this life and live this life in a way that has me be present, has me feel love of myself and others, and has me, joyfully move throughout the world.
Exactly. And I think absolutely love that. And when you listen to people who are much, much older than we are, people who are clearly getting into their 90s, they'll talk about having much more balance as this. They have social connection. They go for a walk. Blue zone people are good examples of of living this way. Very, they eat cake,
Hmm.
they enjoy things, but they eat
Absolutely.
beans too, so they're not rigid, because rigidity is harsh.
Yes. Hmm. Hmm. There's a term, strong like bamboo, right? And bamboo has this property where it has some bend to it, and it also has strength to it, right? So it is this, just like you're speaking to, it's okay. There are things that we know work and honor our health, and also we know that being a little bendable is in honor of our health also.
Exactly. And in terms of sort of our weight, that really does help, doesn't it? Not to be so rigid. And
Yes.
even if we, go to saying, well, I'm not going to eat sugar and I'm not going to this and that, there is a line, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you can even think about, a little one in your life, someone who's, 2 or 3 years old, right? Just starting to learn the world. And if you give them a rule, the first thing they'll do is break it. Right? So
Yeah.
that part of us is still in us, right? So rules typically are not a good match, but creating some self-guided boundaries. Boundaries are fundamentally our own instructions for ourselves about what works for us, right? A boundary might be, okay, it works well for me to put my phone down and plug it in and walk away from it at 9 o'clock at night. That's an example of a boundary.
Yes.
Like you were saying, a boundary might be something like, I mostly don't look at the sweets at the checkout line. Like, that's my typical habit. And once in a while, I'll grab something. Okay, great. That's a nice boundary. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those sort of things. So we are allowed
Yes.
some chocolate. We are allowed a glass of wine.
Yes.
But there's a difference between that and that being a hardwired habit that isn't serving us.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what if you were going to give my listeners one takeaway today that would make the biggest difference for them and their health? What would that be, Jessie?
It would be an invitation to take a question and use it with yourself throughout your day. And that question is, what is my best game right now? What's the best choice I can make to care for myself and my health and my well-being in this moment? And one of the things about that question is we're dropping the broken script of perfection or nothing, right? Deprivation or overindulgence. We're dropping that. And we're starting to get curious about, in this moment, what's the best choice I could make, right? And so when you play that game, you might come up with, for example, if we're talking about movement, well, I intended to, work out for 45 minutes and then something came up. And so I could do nothing, but actually I have 10 minutes. I could go do a few sun salutations. I could go, go for a walk outside, whatever the case may be, right? So you're playing a better game versus all or nothing. Around nutrition, it might be something like, well, I'm out to dinner celebrating my birthday or my anniversary or whatever the case may be. And I could have the picture perfect meal, so to speak, or I could have the steak and order a side of broccoli and maybe have a little bit less of those mashed potatoes, right? So finding your better game in the moment.
Yeah, I really love that, because then it makes it much easier to do, to follow through with those things.
Yeah. And that's a question that's just always, I find it always useful. It's right. What is my best game in this moment?
And we are certainly going to encourage you, listeners, to ask yourself that question.
Yeah.
Maybe several times a day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And whether that is, as we said, exercise or something we're going to eat or a moment to take a breath, manage our stress, we can do it in all sorts of scenarios through the day.
Yes.
Beautiful. Jessie, thank you so much for coming on Thriving Through Menopause and sharing some really good insights into cravings. I mean, they're great and they help us to understand that and this whole all or nothing teaching.
Thank you.
Mindset.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure to be here with you and your community.
That's lovely. How can my listeners get in touch with you and the work that
you
do?
You can find me at wellempowered.com. Wellempowered.com. We're going to be soon launching an upcoming course, and I work with people one-on-one. And for you listeners, if you're interested in exploring working together, whether it's through a course or one-on-one work, and you schedule a consultation, make sure you let me know Clarissa sent you, because you will be gifted 10% off. And also, you can find me on Instagram at wellempowered. And then last invitation is if you would like to sign up for our weekly dares. So we send dares of the week to people on Sundays, and these are micro habits. So small little things that you can begin practicing in your life. Text US 312-967-8000. That's US +1 312-967-8000. And you'll say, dare me, and add your email address, and we'll add you to our dare list.
That is fantastic. I like that. I'll be doing that.
Oh, great. I love it.
Be on the dare list, definitely.
Yes.
That's wonderful. So just thank you again. And we're going to put all of that information in the show notes. So listeners, you will be able to find out, work with Dr. Jessie, take her course, and definitely join up to Dare You. Beautiful. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you gained tremendous value on this conversation about the physiological side of cravings and how important our hormones and our habits such as sleep are in helping us to better manage this whole stage of our life, which seems to just rear its head in perimenopause. And if you found value from this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to Thriving Through Menopause so that another woman can gain benefit from the experts that join me on this show. Until the next episode, which is later this week, which is also about cravings with Dr. Glenn, go well. Go well. Go well. Go well.